Recently, I got an opportunity to take a nighttime candlelit holiday tour of Prickett's Fort State Park, and I thought I would share that experience and talk about a little bit about the history of the holidays throughout history here in the Mountain State. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm the best Virginian. I bring you history and travel videos from across the Mountain State of West Virginia. And if you have plans on meeting the Flatwoods monster under the mistletoe this holiday season, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I mean, you might be thinking about trying to smooch with Mothman, but he's not invited to holiday parties anymore because he kept knocking over the Christmas tree. So Prickett's Fort State Park is divided really up into three different areas. You have the visitor center and the museum, which I've talked about before, showing you some of my pictures from the inside of there. The fort itself, which we have talked about before, it was set up to depict an 18th century holiday celebration, and the Job Prickett House, which was set up to show off kind of a 19th century holiday. So let's start off by talking about the holidays during the 1700s. Just for clarification, this time period is roughly about 10 to 20 years before the American Revolution up until the beginning of the 1800s. So think the time period of like George Washington, the 7 Years' War, or if you've ever watched the TV show Harlots. I really need to go back and finish watching Harlots. That's the time period that we're going to be talking about during this part of the video. And initially, at this point, Christmas was illegal in several parts of the American colonies. The Puritans really hated the extravagant religious celebrations, and you could actually be fined in Massachusetts for celebrating Christmas, or even if you were just a business owner that for some reason had to close down your business on December 25th, you were probably going to be fined. Now, with that being said, in more rural areas where people died all the time from disease, exposure, animal attacks, skirmishes with the indigenous peoples, religious officials were a lot less likely to actually impose any type of fine or punishment on people celebrating the holidays. So how did people in these super isolated areas celebrate the holidays? First and foremost, they worked really hard to not freeze or starve to death. But if they did do anything special for the holidays, it was probably bringing in some greenery to remind them that spring was right around the corner, much like we do today with Christmas trees, except they didn't use conifers like spruce and pine and cedar, because that practice was still linked heavily with pagan religions of the old world. Instead, they brought in greenery from holly trees and rhododendron trees or laurels. And a lot of that still carries over to the holidays today, with holly being a very prevalent green. I would like to see more rhododendron incorporated, like West Virginia state flower incorporated more into the holidays. Let's try and make that happen. Now, if you were to give someone a gift during this time period, most likely it was going to be in the form of a visit, going to visit neighbors, really the most prominent gift during this time period. Imagine being in a tiny little isolated cabin, your closest neighbors like maybe 10, 15 miles away with just your family, and as you're trying to survive and as you're trying to stay warm, this like little thought kind of pops into your head of, what if I traveled across the ocean and everyone else out there is dead? Okay, load up the sled. We're heading, 10, 15 miles out into the cold to make sure the Smiths haven't been eaten by bears. It would be a big morale boost for really everyone involved. And these visits would often be accompanied with some drinking, probably rum, and maybe a special hunt, maybe a hunting trip, a little bit of games and gambling, and if the hunt was especially successful, maybe some type of big meal. Drinking, gambling, feasting, all things that those Puritans that outlawed Christmas probably weren't big fan of, but again, what are they gonna do about it? And at some point, the Christmas tree was slowly introduced to the colonies right around the middle to end of the American Revolution is the estimate most people give. They're either brought over by German immigrants or by Hessian soldiers aiding the British during the American Revolution. And by the dawn of the 19th century, many Christmas traditions had actually spread to the majority of the United States. The Job Prickett house was depicting what a typical holiday celebration would look like during this time period. And it's not that different than what you think about when you think of Christmas celebrations to this day. A lot of modern Christmas traditions kind of date back to the Victorian era of the mid to late 1800s. With the Industrial Revolution, a lot of practices kind of came about that we think of and associate with holiday seasons still to this day. For example, railroad travel allowed people to visit loved ones, travel much further distances, much cheaper than before, in order to visit family members for the holidays. And with a boom in immigration, many holiday traditions from around the world eventually would make their way to the Americas. Christmas trees were commonplace, so it kind of looks like the pagans ended up winning after all. Take that, Puritans. And a boom in manufacturing toys went from being something that were expensive and or handmade items to being more commonplace for middle-class individuals and families. And we still see a lot of these traditions to this day. Feast, gift-giving, tree decorations, Christmas cards, all became super common during this time period. But if you're looking at these pictures, you might be wondering what's going on with all the pineapples. And there's some really weird history when you start looking into pineapples. So initially, pineapples were only found in very tropical areas, and as European empires expanded, these tropical fruits became associated with just the richest and most royal individuals of society. In order to get them back to the old world, you had to be very well connected. You had to have a lot of resources at your disposal. Then with the advent of the greenhouse, a lot of these tropical fruits and plants were able to grow in much cooler climates like those of Europe. But the time, effort, and overhead associated with growing them still made them pretty much only available to the richest members of European society. Eventually, someone would get the bright idea that instead of eating pineapples, you could make money just by renting them out to parties. Yes, there were organizations that would grow pineapples and rent them out just so you could set it on a table for people to look at and go, wow, that person must be really, really rich and well off. Or better yet, you could rent a pineapple and pay someone just to walk around your party holding it, again, to show how rich and powerful you were. Or also at the time period, if you had gout, people just thought you were rich and very well off. So pineapple, gout. But either way, people were going to think you were very fancy and well off. As time would go on, pineapples would become cheaper and cheaper and available to the middle class. But the idea of pineapples being associated with fanciness and good hosts would stick around. So during this time period of the mid to late Victorian era, a lot of pineapples were incorporated into parties, incorporated into furniture and other ways just to depict that you were a good host. There was still that weird association there. So that's where we're going to end it for this video. It was really great seeing Prickett's Fort, a place I've been to 3 or 4 times in a completely different light. Literally, it was the first time I'd been there during nighttime, and the Candlelit tour was a really, really great experience. Seeing everything kind of decked out for the holidays was really pretty, and it was a great opportunity to learn how the holidays were celebrated during these different time periods throughout history. Let me know down in the comments if you and your family have any unique holiday traditions. I think for me, growing up, it really wasn't the holidays unless we would drink copious amounts of coffee and go back through watching old professional wrestling VHSs, really watching the best matches from throughout the year. Also, hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet and you like this video, and sharing these videos really helps grow the channel. Of course, leave a like, that really helps me out too. But until next time, don't forget to stay wild, stay wonderful, happy holidays everyone, and I'll talk to you later.